Alrighty, welcome to the third edition of Beyond Combat, the show that brings together mixed martial arts and the outside world. My name is Nick Baldwin, and I'm your host as always. And joining me on this edition of the show is a MMA and boxing staff writer for CombatPress.com. It is my good friend Justyn Likes. Justyn, how's it going?
What's up, man? It is going good. Enjoying these 80-degree winter temperatures we got here in Texas.
You were telling me off air a second ago that you want it to be winter. Let me tell you, you do not want it to be winter. We are sitting right here in Winnipeg at about I think it was minus 12 Fahrenheit, something like that. Not good.
Yeah, no, not that cold. That's a whole different level from winter. That's like, yeah, that's another season right there.
What is winter in San Antonio? That you're in San Antonio, right?
Yeah, winter in San Antonio is 50 degrees, maybe 50. 40 is like cold. That's about it.
That's a nice fall day here in the Peg. Well, anyways, and for anybody that doesn't know, again, Beyond Combat is a very new show. I am bringing on MMA or combat sports people, typically MMA, because that's what I cover. And I know, Justyn, you recently moved over more to boxing. You actually started a new podcast with King Mo, a very recognized Bellator light heavyweight fighter, now heavyweight Grand Prix competitor. You sort of made the shift over to boxing. Before we get into what we are planning to talk about for the most part, and we'll get to that in a sec. Why did you choose to sort of make your focus boxing? Because I know you had been doing MMA ever since, you were sort of around on Twitter and I knew who you are. You were just another MMA writer. Why did you switch over to boxing?
It's funny how been pulling back to MMA. So it's kind of half and half now. But with boxing, what I saw was like, there's just this void I thought that needed to be filled. There's not a lot of, if you go out there and see what out there in boxing, there's not a ton of outlets, not a ton of like really professional writers out there. So I was like, there's a void as far as, because what I like to do is telling these fire stories. So the boxing, I just thought there was a huge void there to be filled with good coverage, good stories. So I felt like, let's try to make a run at it. And so far it's been going really good.
Good. And there are so many MMA writers out there. I mean, myself included. We're both just in the pool of so many people. Was that did that play into the decision? Just because, I mean, I'm again, I can't say this for sure just because I don't, I'm not on boxing Twitter, so to speak. But I feel that MMA is still bigger right now. It's sort of gone past boxing in a way. I feel like there's more MMA coverage and maybe more spots available in the boxing side of it.
Yeah, if you look on social media, I think MMA has taken over boxing. If you're just looking at social media, and if you're looking at writers and all that, MMA is definitely it. I mean, even when I started talking to you a few years ago, just look at how many more MMA writers and sites are now out there. With boxing, it's kind of been just the same. You don't see a lot of boxing writers or guys doing blogs or websites. So I thought that was a perfect opportunity to try to jump into it.
Well, interesting. Anyways, you don't do this full time. You're not a full-time boxing writer. You're not a full-time MMA writer. It's sort of just a side gig, like a lot of people in this field, in this industry, which kind of sucks for a lot of people that are wanting to do this full time. But when your main job, your sort of day job, so to speak, is you're actually a school teacher. And this is going to be really interesting because I happen to still attend school. I am in grade 12. And you happen to teach kids. I know as of late you have been teaching younger kids. We'll talk about that and why that's the case. But I know you want ideally, you'll be teaching high school kids, and you have already. So this is going to be interesting. So let me go back a number of years. When did you first want to become a teacher? Was it, when your parents ask you when you're, say, 10 years old, what do you want to, do when you grow up, or when you, a relative or a friend or whoever? Did you always want to be a teacher? Or was that something that came later in life? And, did you sort of have that stereotypical response? Oh, I want to, be a professional, sports player. I want to be an astronaut. And then you realized, yeah, maybe not. Let's just stick to teaching. When did you want to become a teacher?
Let's see, middle school, I honestly, elementary, middle school, I thought I was going to be a sports player, an athlete. And then
As I said, pretty
yeah,
stereotypical.
exactly. Right. And then I realized when I tore my ACL my freshman year playing soccer that had some complications. So I knew that wasn't going to work out. I knew that when I was stopped growing at like 5'6", I knew that was going to be an issue trying to be an athlete. So this teaching thing wasn't like where I was like, you know what, I always want to be a teacher. I want to be a teacher, mom. No, that wasn't the case. In fact, when I got out of high school, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I was going to community college for 2 years. So I joined the athletic training program there to be a student athletic trainer, working with like the football team, basketball team, baseball team. That didn't work out. That went terrible. It's pretty sad to say, but taping an ankle is like one of the basic things you have to know how to do as a student athletic trainer. I sucked at it. Like I could not tape an ankle. I thought it was simple. You just tape it. No, I sucked at the most basic thing you had to do to be a student athletic trainer. So I didn't do that. So it wasn't until about after my 2 years and I transferred over to university was when I was like, you know what, let's do this teaching thing. You had good teachers. Teaching was always something that, you know, would have been possibly a fallback. And it just so happened I, you know, just fell in love with wanting to do it again.
Very interesting. So you did your first full teaching year last year, if I'm not mistaken, yes?
Yeah, last year.
So what did you have to do before that? I know you said you went to community college, not for teaching. So then did you have to get another degree? I don't know. What is it, a diploma after community college? I'm not sure if we're...
Yeah.
Okay.
When I went to 2 years, 2 years of college, you get your associate's degree, which really, an associate's degree doesn't even help because you're not specialized in anything. So then when I transferred over to university, I got majored in history. That was my major. So I spent like 4 more years getting majored in history. I didn't specialize in teaching or anything like that. I went through an alternative program, which is something outside of the university level, to where if you have a degree, you want to become a teacher, you sign up for this program, and they basically help you become a teacher as far as streamlining the process so that I didn't have to go back to college for like 2 more years to get certified.
Why did you major in history? Was history also something growing up you were interested in, or was it sort of
History was definitely what I would have always loved. Like since elementary school, middle school, high school, history was something that I've always loved. So that's why I went to major in that.
And so as far as I know, in Canada, I'm sure similar, although the education systems in the US and Canada are different. I would assume you had to be, you know, a student teacher for a few years. Was that what you had to do before last year, or is that not an American thing?
Well, you do have to be a student teacher most of the time. Like 90% of the time, people go through a student teaching process. With my alternative certification process, I had to just do like hours to where I was in the classroom, not teaching, just like observing.
Okay.
And then going through like online modules I had to pass and stuff, but I didn't have to actually do student teaching, which is actually a regret that I didn't do student teaching because it would have made it a lot easier.
And so last year was the first time you ever taught anybody, really. You before that, you had just sort of been learning how to do that. Last year was the first time you ever applied what you had learned.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a shock, maybe.
Yeah, it was. You try to prepare as much as possible for situations you're going to be thrown into, stuff that happens, how to deal with students in this way, how to be comfortable teaching, how to do lesson plans, all that. You try to be as prepared as possible. But that's why I say that student teaching experience would have been great. But I didn't have that, so kind of day one was kind of like being thrown into the fire. So it was an interesting experience. I loved it. I will definitely be doing it again, which we'll talk about. But yeah, that was the first day being in there, any type of teaching besides subbing, which I had done briefly before.
Did you have an option to start? You know, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 28.
Could you have started earlier?
Yeah, I could have started way earlier if I didn't try my little athletic training experiment that didn't fail, and if I didn't take so long to graduate, college, because it took me longer with moving and paying too much attention to stuff outside of school instead of focusing on my studies. So I should have been honestly teaching. If I would have been normal, like people 18, you graduate at 22, you start teaching around 23. But with me changing careers, it took a little later.
Was that annoying? Did that change anything? Did that affect anything, or was it simply you're just 5 years older when you started?
No, because still being in the classroom, you're 5 years, older than but to the kids, you're still young.
It's still a first time experience.
Yeah, it's still first time experience. You're still young. I wasn't old by any means, but it would have been nice to start earlier. But all those years of stuff I had to go through, I thought got me more prepared to be a teacher. But the stuff I got into was like, wow, crazy experience.
And so before last year, before you had your own classroom, before you actually started teaching, what were there a few things that stand out now that were reasons as to why you wanted to teach, things you thought you would like about teaching? And I'm not saying, things that you can still like about, them or they can be reasons even today why you will continue teaching and enjoy teaching. What was it before you started teaching that you thought you would like about it, that you thought, reasons as to why you wanted to do this for your career?
Yeah, I had two really good teachers back in middle school. Sixth grade teacher and eighth grade teacher, Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Fix, who I still keep in contact with all these years later. And for me, especially when you're going through middle school, you're going through like an identity crisis. You don't know who the heck you are. Your body's going through all these changes. It's just a weird time. So to have teachers there that were really like there for you and guiding you and mentoring you, and even in high school when one of the reasons I wanted to become a teacher was my dad was in high school. He was stationed in the Middle East at the time with the Iraq and Afghanistan war going on. He had got injured. So he had to be medevaced. And that was a scary, scary situation because it was like, crap, is he going to be okay? Well, the first person that was there for me besides my mom was my old teacher from sixth grade. So I just knew right then and there the impact a teacher can have, not just standing up in front of the classroom and teaching, but how they can really be like a role model and like a mentor for you and help you grow and deal with situations outside of the classroom.
And so you sort of, at that moment realized, hey, I can be that mentor when I'm older too.
Yeah, I saw the power that a good teacher can have if they really dedicate themselves to the profession and they really care about their students. I knew how that impact you can have. So that was kind of like, that's something that, I want to be able to do myself.
So let's talk about what it was like having your classroom for the first time, going in there, the first day. Were you nervous? Were you, I remember, if I remember correctly, I remember, your Facebook post, how it seemed like you were almost over prepared or maybe not over prepared, but you're damn sure. And you're damn on top of yourself as far as making sure you're ready, making sure everything's in order.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I felt prepared, but until you get in there, it is completely different. The 4 weeks, man, I was so nervous, and the kids knew it, because I was teaching sophomores world history and seniors, and they knew it. I was nervous. It was hard making eye contact at first. That's how darn nervous I was. So it took a couple weeks to kind of like break that ice for me. But yeah, I was nervous. I didn't know what I was walking into. I thought I did.
I find that interesting just because rarely do I, as a student, have any experiences like, being taught by not a vulnerable teacher, but in a way like teachers are always, looked at, oh, they're in charge of the class, and they are, rightfully so, of course. They're teaching the class, and they're there for a reason. But it must have been interesting for the students to have the teacher up in front of them who's supposed to be almost guiding them, directing them, making sure they're, doing, good behavior and they're under control, while you're nervous and maybe you couldn't, it must have been interesting for them.
Yeah, and like I said, they picked up on that, and that's one of the things with the teachers. Like from day one, you have to have like these guidelines set and these disciplinary procedures set and everything. And for me, being able to first time in a classroom and being nervous like that, it was to where they picked up on that, and they tried to push my buttons and stuff, and it took a couple of weeks to kind of get comfortable. But then where I was at was also a pretty difficult environment. So the whole year I got more comfortable as far as not having nerves, but it was still a tough situation to try to make it through.
That first day, it sounds like almost every day for a substitute teacher. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is.
Besides maybe the nerves, just because substitutes are used to doing their job, but they still sort of get their buttons pushed. So it's
yeah. Especially having that experience now with subbing, it's like that every day. As far as you don't have any control.
And you mentioned you weren't in a great environment. What do you can you expand? What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, I was teaching. The district I was teaching at was a rough school district. As far as economically, a lot of these kids had a lot of situations going on, almost all of them outside the home, and I ended up really bonding with them and having a great experience, but it was still rough because there was no structure for a lot of them outside of the home. So when there's no structure and there's no someone guiding them outside the home, they bring that into the classroom because what else do they know? But it's really never the kids that I put the blame on. It was just a rough administration, a lot of new administrative people that really just didn't know how to run a school, to be honest.
And so you talk about how the kids that you were teaching, so your first month or first week, whenever however long it took you to start getting comfortable, when they were pushing your buttons, so to speak, what do you recall exactly what they were doing? Were they just saying mean things to you? Were they not listening? Were they what exactly paint the picture for me a little bit?
Oh, it happened all throughout the year, but I remember the second week of school I got cussed out. I think the second month I got cussed out, and then the second semester I got cussed out. And we're not just talking little cuss words here. We're talking full blown, F you. Just like one kid wanted to fight me in the middle of class.
Wow.
Now the second week when that happened, when I got cussed out, I took it super hard. Like I took it personal. Not like me lashing back at the kid, because that's a no-no. But as far as wow, I can't believe I got cussed out. But then the second time it happened, it was kind of like, are you done? Just get out of my class. I would just tell the kid, step outside. And then when I told him to step outside, he was he tried to come up to me and square up and everything. And I'm just I just told him dude, just get out of my classroom. I'm not going to fight you in the middle of class.
You're going to have thick skin as a teacher, it seems. But this is different. I mean, I go to a good school. I'm not going to, not say that I definitely do. As far as their behavior, for the most part, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the kids, the majority were fine, but even swearing at the teacher doesn't really happen like that. I've never had much of an experience with that, or kids wanting to fight. I mean, maybe the odd kid who has anger issues or has something going on, maybe, but is that more of a was that because the school district you were working for wasn't they had a lot of issues going on outside of class or wherever? Was that sort of is that going on more than just here, or was that more just in this one school because it wasn't a fantastic school, so to speak?
It was more of a district thing. And like I said, the kids were great. And I think more of the blame I put on for how the situations were dealt were that the people in charge at the higher level at the school didn't deal with the situation serious enough, So if a kid cusses me out, this is what really, really just upset me. I remember the second time getting cussed out and the kid wanted to fight me. I'd be cool with the kid the next day. That's fine. It happened yesterday, but the administratives didn't do anything about it. Like, he was in my class. He was in my class the very next day. And from when that happened, I just got this, wait, you're sending this kid a message that he can do what he wants and have no repercussions. If I'm the kid, I'm going to continue to lash out and do stuff if I know I'm not going to be held accountable for my actions. So it was just the atmosphere that the principals and stuff set to where you could get away with anything you wanted as a student. And so they're going to act like that if they're not held responsible.
And so, for example, when you got cussed out, maybe the first time, as you said, you took it, kind of hard, you were a little thrown off. I assume, just judging or based off what you were saying about the admin, you went to admin, but then they just, sort of shrugged it off a little bit. What?
Yeah, it was just a shrug off. It was, like I said, the second time it happened, the kids in my class the very next day. And I just remember from high school, when these incidents did happen, the kid was maybe ISS, something more serious was done. They weren't just back in school the very next day, especially in that class. So it was to where from that get-go, I was like, crap, if I don't have like administration on my side dealing with these things, then it's going to be a long, long year.
Did you have similar situations when you were a student? Like, it's always interesting, I think, as a teacher, because everyone was a certain age at one point in their life. Like, you were, a senior in high school at one point. Were you almost not used to it, but not shocked just because, maybe other, similar things happened when you were in their spot? Can you relate? Because
even in the years of high school I never had to where a teacher was cussed out.
Right.
Fights and stuff, it happened all the time at lunchtime, people fighting in the hallways, people fighting, but I never had it in the 4 years. And I never went to like great schools. They were, my dad was in the Army, so these were military schools, so you had all types of people together, but it was never to where it was you're getting cussed out. That was like something I never had happen or saw happen to a teacher. So when that happened to me, it was like, whoa, like this is weird.
Before you started teaching, I guess it would have been, say, the summer of 2016, or I know in the States you start a bit sooner. Do you start end of August, late August? When did school start?
End of August.
Okay, so say during the summer 2016, did you reach out to, future colleagues or people you knew that were teachers, other friends, whoever, and sort of just ask them, what should I expect, say, in my first week, or did you sort of get any info from other people?
Oh yeah, like I said, my past teachers, I picked their brain as much as possible, and even that situation of as far as being cussed out never was brought up to me. But I thought I was prepared as much as possible. I got tons of advice from fellow teachers, but even situation, like I said, getting cussed out was not one thing they were like, hey, this is going to happen, because I don't think it even happened to them.
And I know it, this was definitely a dream, being a teacher, just judging by, I remember, Facebook posts when you first got this job, you were ecstatic. You were, this was something you've been working towards for years. You were, super pumped and looking forward to it. Did that at all change over say the 7 or 8 months you were teaching in that school? The dream come true. Did that stay a dream? Did that, sort of fall off? Because did your opinion change on how much you wanted to teach change or decrease, judging on the way you were treated and what the job actually was?
Yeah, I think the dream of still teaching was there, but not teaching where I was at. I know the time where it became not, because everyone has bad days, but the moment where it became not fun to show up to work was the day before spring break. The office and all the first year teachers were going to be let known that day whether they're going to be back next year or whether they're not going to be back next year. So I was brought into the office. I was feeling confident. I was making a lot of progress. I was doing really well. And then when I walked in at the end of the day, they said, hey, Mr. Likes, unfortunately, we're not going to be bringing you back next year. So I was like that hit me super hard. So then I had all spring break to try to ponder that. And then there were still a couple months left of school. So back then it was like, okay, so I'm not going to be back. They don't want me back, basically. I'm not getting the help I'm needing. So that's when it became more of a chore to try to go to work than it was.
And you ended early. You left early sort of because of this, if I'm not mistaken. True?
Yeah. I had, there was maybe a month left of school. I had just had a car accident that was put me in the ER a bunch of times with that. And then it was to where like, it was on top of that. And then just like a breaking point of, I just can't do this. Like this is too tough. And then the complications with the car accident. So I ended up a couple weeks being able to resign.
Did you feel bad when you did leave with about a month left? Because I've had teachers, get pregnant or have an injury and have to leave. Like I've had teachers that taught me my whole year, 8 months, and then they leave with 2 months or 1 month left in the whole school year. And it's not the end of the world, but it's a little annoying just because you're used to their teaching style. You're used to say their style of tests or assignments, or you're just used to how they teach overall. And, when a new person comes in, they're not as familiar with you. You have to get to know them again. And it's just kind of annoying. I know, there was the odd kid that would cuss you out and didn't care for you, but there are a lot of kids I assume you formed pretty good relationships with, educationally wise. Was it tough knowing, as you leave that they're there and they're having to deal with sort of what a lot of kids go through? It's not not a big deal, but as I said, it kind of does suck when a teacher leaves, say, with 30 days left in the year.
No, it hit me. It hit me hard. I mean, for a couple of weeks, even longer, I was a mess, because I felt like I quit, like I let them down. And then a lot of students were outpoured a lot of support, like, hey, are you okay? What's wrong? And I had a few students that didn't know exactly what was going on. It hit me hard because, like you said, I formed a lot of really good bonds, especially with my seniors, because, they're going on to do bigger things after high school. So to me, I felt first that, man, I let them down. So it was hard. Luckily, I did go to graduation though for the seniors, and that was cool because so many of them were they hadn't seen me in a couple weeks. So, they were happy to see me and stuff. And that kind of was like a silver lining, like, what, it was tough, but this is what you're teaching for, is these moments like this where these kids are thanking you. And then I had messages on Facebook saying, you were the best teacher we had. Sorry, things didn't go your way. I feel so much more prepared. When you get stuff like that, what you're doing is worth it.
What are your thoughts on having a not really outside of school, but sort of, relationship with students, and more so just having them on social media? I know a lot of teachers, have their social media very, very private, so students can't see it or add them as a friend, or it's very, very sort of it's almost, it's just not something typically is done. What are your thoughts on that? I know you mentioned you have some students on Facebook. Is that something that's a bit more normal in the States?
No.
Or no?
No, it's I added them after they had graduated, because one thing you're told into is to avoid any situations like that. So having Facebook or Instagram and following people that are like your students, that's just a big no-no. Basically, you don't want to put yourself in any situations. My Facebook was always made private because you're just under a microscope as a teacher. So you don't want to have anything out there to where maybe there's a post someone disagrees with and then they bring it to the principal. Even on Twitter, like when I became a teacher, I toned down my language because I was a potty mouth. Like I would say things that probably weren't great to be said on Twitter, but
maybe that's why your students started cussing you out.
So, I mean, so like now that you're under a microscope and you're held to like a higher pedestal. Yeah, you got to kind of watch. You do have to watch what you post, what you tweet, what you put on Instagram. I can't Instagram and show a picture of me like drinking a beer. Even that's supposed to be like, don't do it. So you really have to watch pushing send on social
just
media.
Have two accounts, one private, one public, and basically one the appropriate one that students can maybe ask or access if they're really into that. But
and it's really easy to find out me on Twitter. I mean, I'm not under some alias.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Did
Justyn
anybody
Likes, so.
did people come across your Twitter and realize, hey, this guy writes about MMA? That's interesting.
Yeah, when they first found me on Twitter, I had students that would try to send me like BSing with me, so I had to ignore it, like just don't reply. But that was one of the things that I used kind of as a bridge between me and the students was my writing career with MMA. So we'd have a lot of discussions with the guys. Hey, who's your favorite MMA fighter? I would tell them, hey, I've talked to this person. So that was something that I actually will continue to use because, with MMA and boxing, it's such a popular sport. So I used that in the classroom as a way to, to build a rapport, because there were a lot of these people that were like, what, you got to go to this event and you talked to this person? And it was like, yeah, I've done that. So that they thought that was pretty cool.
That's interesting because I mean, it's great. There's nothing wrong with it, but just sort of what I would, if you were to ask me what, do I, make my MMA side of my life known to my students, I would have said no, just because, again, teachers it's so important to sort of keep their outside life away from their students. But I find it interesting that you were able to integrate it completely.
Yeah, I used it to help build a rapport. You're trying to build rapport with students any way possible. And my personal life was, outside of that was always kept to myself. But I felt that, let's try to connect with these kids on some sort of level, and when they were, some of them that were big in MMA, we'd come back from a Monday and they'd be like, oh, what'd you think of that fight? And, what'd you think of that? It was just a nice way to kind of open up a class and just kind of relax as far as before we got into teaching. We just kind of talking a few minutes about how the fights went down and stuff.
And then your principal would unexpectedly walk in the door one day and ask you, Mr. Likes, why are you talking about Conor McGregor and not, World War II?
Well, if they walked in the beginning of class, that was one thing you had to be careful too, because, with a first year teacher, you got principals always coming in. So as much as I would love to talk more about fighting and stuff, you had to be teaching, your stuff. And I know I did have a few kids that were like, hey, Mr. Likes, can you do an arm bar on me? Or
and you're like, no.
and I would tell them, I've been telling them, like, as much as I would love to for self-defense purposes, imagine what would happen if somebody walked in.
That would be
arm bar you. Or imagine if you want to be that type of kid that is like, oh, my arm hurts. Mr. Likes put me in an arm bar. And there goes my job. So
he didn't like my behavior, so he tapped me out and choked me unconscious. Yeah,
but I did have suggestions of, hey, show me how to do an arm bar, and I'm like, man, I barely know how to do an arm bar. I don't practice jiu-jitsu.
It must have been tempting, though. I mean, again, I know in the back of your head you're like, no, I can't. But it's like, I kind of want to show off but you got to stay professional. That's really important.
Oh, when I had started boxing last year, I always wanted to be like, man, let me show them how to, throw this hook and stuff. But yeah, you had to be careful.
But even going back as far as the making sure you're sort of on topic, because, once in a while I'll have teachers who just start talking about a random thing. Some kid asks them a question unrelated to the discussion or the subject or, what we're taking. And then they end up talking about that thing for, say, 5 minutes. And it's always interesting to think, what would happen if all of a sudden the principal, like even today, first period, I was in economics and my teacher is super old. He's like 75 years old. I think he's been doing this forever. And he's super easy as far as, very few assignments, tests are super easy. It's kind of a waste of a class in a way. But, even today we were watching a video I don't know how he found it or why we were watching it, but it was some apparently this was a big thing last year. I didn't know about it, but a hatchable. It's like a kid's toy.
Oh
It's
yeah, I
like the
didn't. I
egg, the
didn't.
stuffed animal pops
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah. And so we were watching a video on that. It was like an unboxing video on those. And he, halfway through, he said, I wonder what would happen if the principal walked in. And then he shut it off. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, those things were crazy. How every holiday season there's like that one toy that for some reason just becomes crazy. There was like, shoot, 10 years ago or something, it was like the Tickle Me Elmo that everyone wanted to get a hold of. And last year it was that hatchable thing. If you have a good principal, situations like that aren't awkward because most principals have been teachers. They know you're not going to spend an entire class. Sometimes it's not going to be 50 minutes or however long your class is of just teaching. Stuff is going to pop up and side conversations are going to happen. So
I think in a way, some people need to realize, hey, a teacher is a human being too. A kid is, at the end of the, I mean, again, it's sort of, maybe I'm biased because I'm a student and I don't want teachers hawking over, everybody or a principal, but, principal is a human. We're all the same. We're all human beings. We all, are in a way equal, but of course, I mean, as far as the jobs go. But it's interesting though. I think even teachers sometimes, you can talk about this more than I can, but I feel like even just seeing how some of my teachers interact with the principal, like on occasion, rarely, you can tell they're not on edge, but it's sort of a sense of that in a way.
Yeah, no doubt. With me being my first year, I was kind of to where I was sort of on edge because you're under a microscope.
Like any boss, you around any boss.
Yeah. I mean, you're never going to be super cool with them because they're your boss, but you hope to where you're not at that situation to where you're on edge, with someone.
How does that actually work? So the principal in a school system is your boss, or are you actually, or I know they're ahead of you because they're a principal, as far as the totem pole, but they who employs you? Is it like the school board, or does the principal have the capabilities of actually firing you?
The school district is what you're working under, but the principal hired me, and the principal makes the decision to let you go, to hire and fire. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I want to ask you a couple things, pretty quick questions, just as far as in-class behavior sort of things and rules. And then I do want to ask more about the future, since we went back, talked about your first year of, as you talked about, you had left early, and I want to discuss sort of what is happening now. Phones, cell phones, for any teacher in the 21st century, kind of annoying, I would imagine. What did you sort of enforce as far as a rule, as far as cell phone use?
I was going to ask you that too, about phones, because you're still in school. Yes. And for me, it was a policy that I could never get a handle on. And again, I go back to how the school handled it. To me, it was, all right, phones aren't going to become an issue until they become the issue. And then they became the issue. And then it was because it was to the point where it's like, if you have your phone out, put it on the desk, like put it away. And then it became to where it just was like hard to manage. Like, it was supposed to be to where, look, if you have your phone out and it's taken up by the teacher, then it goes to the office, your parent has to come pick it up. Well, the thing is, the school never enforced that. So some classrooms, the kids would always be on their phones. For mines, I didn't allow it, but it still would happen. And it goes back to just being enforced. If the school would have enforced that, look, we have no cell phone policy, which is what the code of conduct, like our school code of conduct said, no cell phone policy. It just never was enforced. So I go back to like being cussed out. If the kid knows they can be on their phone, if it gets taken up and they'll get it back, they're going to continue to use it over and over and over again. So that was something to where, like, whenever I step into a classroom again, it has to be like no cell phones. And I have to know. And I usually go into job interviews asking this is, look, how do you guys handle your cell phone policy? Because it's something that was not handled where I was at. And it's something to where it became like my number one enemy was cell phones. I wish I could smash them in front of kids. It was awful. I hated it.
And because of, our bias and our differences, me being a student, you being a teacher, we're sort of going to disagree. I do not like the idea of a phone being taken to the office and having to be picked up by a parent. I get it. It's taking it one step further, and it's sort of making a student realize, hey, I shouldn't have been doing that. Now I have to pay these even stricter consequences. Maybe I should stop. But I mean, as a student, because it's almost, to me, again, you'll probably disagree because you're a teacher, but for me as a student, it's almost unrealistic. I mean, our classes, how long are your classes? For me, we're sitting in a classroom for 68 minutes. And, if we're not doing much or it's just a long class. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's almost unrealistic to expect a kid in this day and age to sit there listening without checking their phone maybe one time.
Oh, no. And I totally agree with you on that. Our classes were only 50 minutes. And it wasn't until we're like, if I just saw them open up real quick and put it away, I had a problem with it. That's fine, or because I understand.
They're sitting there.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
But yeah. I had people that were like on Snapchat and stuff and like doing these little filters, to get the little bunny ears to pop up on their head. Like while I'm teaching, they're like doing stuff like this, or during the whole class, they have it out and they're playing like Madden with their friends. That's when it became an issue. I don't care if you open it up real quick. That's not the problem. But if you're like completely disrupting the class because you have to send out this Snapchat with
Sure.
you and your little bunny ears like that, that's when it became like stupid that you think this is okay.
Now, I think the idea of it, when a student is using their cell phone, when a teacher is talking, when they're teaching a lesson or doing some sort of lecture or whatever, when they're in front of the class, writing on the whiteboard, teaching a lesson, then I don't think it's okay. But here's where I will differ with sort of what's in place. I mean, with my school, and I think a lot of schools in the city, in Canada even, since we are so technology friendly, or at least they like to think they want to be as far as the school goes. Like you can go to the library and get a laptop to use for the day or whatever. So it's not like your school where it's completely no cell phones are allowed in the building or in the code of conduct or whatever. But there's still a fine line. It's like you can't use your cell phone. You're not supposed to, but you can have them because for educational purposes, once in a while, you, quote, might be able to use your cell phone for something, whether it's for research or whatever. Where I think this would be a good idea. I think when a teacher is talking, when they're doing a lesson, and when everyone is supposed to be paying attention, I don't think anybody should be touching their phones. I don't think they should be on their phones, because that's not even because phones are not allowed. That's just disrespectful. If someone's talking to you and saying something to you, you as in, the class, and they're talking to a 30-person class, that includes you, that's just being disrespectful. That's just not being, that's just not being a nice person. But I think
that's where the problem occurred when you're standing up there teaching and all these people, on their phones. Like if we have an assignment and a kid decides he wants to do it on his phone, you know what? That's okay. If he wants to not pass the assignment or whatever, that's on him. I'm not going to get upset by that. But if I'm up there trying to teach and other people have someone on a phone, then you're distracting other people, then I'm going to get upset. But if you're supposed to be doing your work and you decide, I'm going to blow it off, that's on you. You're not affecting anybody else but yourself. It's just when you're distracting others, that's when it became the issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say before you jumped in, I was going to say that when it's a work period or when the lesson is over, once everybody's working there on assignment or whatever, doing some sort of, homework, then I think it's actually okay for kids to use their cell phones if they wish. Like,
listen to music. If we were studying or doing an assignment, listen to music. Go ahead and do that.
Even
That's
if
fine.
as you said, even if, for the full 50-minute class, it's a work period, and someone sits on their phone on Snapchat or on Twitter or on whatever for 50 minutes straight, I still don't have a problem with that because they're not affecting anybody else. No one else has to know that they're on their phone. And they're just maybe affecting themselves. But even, I'm saying this as a student too, because once in a while I'll maybe not do the assignment and then just do it later. Like I'm a kid. I always have my work on in time. So I think from a student perspective, considering we have outside of school hours time to work on stuff, we should have that choice in a way. If we don't want to do it in class, that kind of sucks, but but so be it. I feel like during a work period, if you want to blow the class away doing whatever on your phone, I kind of think that's okay.
It was to where, look, a couple times I get it, but like if their grade was really suffering, I would have to let a parent know or let them know, or I'd have to do something about it, because it's like,
right.
Look, your grade is suffering, or
if they're failing the course, and
I don't want you. I had kids that would come up to me with like before progress reports and was like, my grade is this low. What can I do? And it'd be like,
don't go on your phone.
Sometimes I'd give leeway, because some people really worked hard and just really struggled on certain assignments. But if you didn't put the effort in, you were on your phone, it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you. Like, you decided to do this, this, and this. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely different. If someone who has a 30 in the class is spending all their time in class on their phone, that's when you should, and I would assume you did step in. Where if someone's sitting with a 95 and they're clearly an intelligent person, but they just don't use their class time wisely, I think that's on them, and that's where I think it's okay. If you're
and another situation though, or another problem though, with being a first year teacher is having a lot of people come into the classroom and having basically your year decided by the reviews you get. Having to take care of the cell phone issue was important, because if a principal comes in and a kid's on their cell phone, I get blamed for it, for not enforcing a policy. So it made me look bad, if a kid's on a phone.
Did anybody make fun of your last name? When of course, they call you Mr. Likes. Did anybody say something like, "Oh, Mr. Likes, we don't like you," like sort of almost a pun in a way? Did anything like that you can remember, or no?
From elementary to high school, it was Justyn Likes pizza. To then when you get to high school, it becomes a hell of a lot more vulgar and inappropriate. And then from 18 to before I started teaching, it was like this nice, quiet, peaceful period of no Justyn Likes, Mr. Likes jokes. And then you're back in high school, and then they came back all the time. What is Mr. Likes like? And there were some times where it was okay, but then there were kids that didn't like you and decided, what, when Mr. Likes isn't looking, we're gonna go on the whiteboard and draw a penis and do Mr. Likes and draw a penis. And I would find that after the class, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, really? So yeah, I've had to deal with those my whole life, and they came back being in a school setting.
Got to come to Canada. I feel like we're more respectful up here.
And if you do, you apologize.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If I draw that on the whiteboard and you're my teacher, at least at the end of the class, I'll come up to you and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." But yeah, I guess that sort of brings us to the very beginning, where maybe don't come to Canada. You said you wanted winter, but not that harsh of winter. So.
No, that's too cold.
You cut out there. I didn't catch what you said.
I said no. That's too cold up there. The temperature.
Pros, cons to everything.
And I don't want to get.
What does it take to be a teacher? I mean, we didn't directly cover it. I mean, again, it takes you need to have thick skin. You can't take. Justyn, are you there?
Yeah.
You just went really robotic.
Yeah, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I was just saying it must take something out there that not everybody has to be a teacher. Like, obviously you need to have thick skin. You can't take everything or anything personal. But what sort of did you realize where it's like, geez, just even for me being a student, it's like not everybody can be a teacher. Like, there's very few people I feel that can get up in front of a class 10 months out of 12 months every weekday and teach a lesson, deal with certain things, being cussed out or behavior, just dealing with a typical high school setting. What does it take? Is there anything that stands out?
You gotta have thick skin. You really do. you can't take things personal, which is what I had a problem with my first year. It's something that you just have to get used to. You have to have thick skin. You have to be personable. You have to be a good communicator because not just with your colleagues and getting along with them, but you have to be a good communicator with your students. Good social skills, having a thick skin, and having a short-term memory, because some days are gonna suck, and you just can't have those linger. Some days your lessons are gonna be awful, and things just aren't gonna go well. So you just have to be able to just be like, you know what, put it in the past, come back the next day, and start fresh. But yeah, definitely you gotta have thick skin. If not, the students they'll prey on you. They'll know. They know weakness. Whatever weakness you have, they will find it, and they will pray and prod at you, until you break, basically.
We might be smarter than you think than a stereotypical dumb teenager.
Yeah, they like I said, they know how to push buttons, and they'll look everywhere for those buttons.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move on to sort of now, the past few months. So as you said a while ago, you left your first position, your first full-time teaching job earlier this year, in about April or May, I guess it would have been a month early. And you tried over the summer to get another job. You had at least a number of interviews just from talking to you. What went wrong? Was it simply you just didn't get the job, and that happens in anything for people? Or,
yeah.
Why are you subbing right now?
I think it was a mixture of experience-wise being passed over by people that have more experience, and then just, I guess, just not. I felt prepared. Like, you go into a job interview and you walk out, you either know it went well or it didn't. I always thought they went well. It just was to where I guess things just didn't go my way. So it was sort of like, you know what? I'll go back to subbing. I'll get the experience I need. I'll get more experience. And then I've also decided, look, I can teach high school social studies. Now I'm working on getting my special ed certification to where basically from kindergarten to 12th grade, I can be employed in the school, working with kids that are, a different type of problems they may have, whether it's their reading skills are lacking, anything like that, to where you're working with them more on a one-on-one setting. So I'm doing that to where December, if I get certified, then I can have more options, when I go back to teaching.
Is there a greater need for special ed teachers? I would think there is, but is that sort of why you might go that route?
Yeah, there's tons of openings. There's always tons of openings. Special ed is sort of an area to where the United States we're finally taking a little more serious. So there's always a lot of a need for it, a lot of openings. So it's something to where I can either go back and teach social studies with a spec ed certification, or I can go work special ed anywhere from elementary to middle to high school. So just more options, the better, so that I'm not sitting on my butt subbing, because subbing is the absolute worst.
And when you didn't get the various teaching positions you applied for over the summer and into, I guess, September, it would have been, it must have been super crushing, because then you sort of realized, okay, I'm going to be subbing for the time being. That kind of sucks. And I do want to ask you a little bit about subbing in a second, but it must have been devastating, just because I know you knew you would have to go to subbing, and that sucks. And like my dad years ago, he wanted to be a teacher as his career, and he got a degree in education, and he didn't get a full-time career or a position, and he was subbing for a couple of years, and he just couldn't do it, and he dropped that, and now he does something completely unrelated to teaching. So he subbed for like 2 or 3 years and said, screw this, I'm not getting a full-time job, let's try something else. Did you start having feelings like that could be you?
Yeah, when it didn't happen, it was like the first thing sucks is when you see all your friends or former colleagues with their school, their posts and stuff like that, because it's like, dang it. I always knew it was going to happen. It just might take more time for me to get back in there again, but it definitely was crushing, not being able to do what I wanted to do, not being able to be like, look, I made the mistakes. I knew I made mistakes, but I'm ready to go back in there. I was so excited to apply everything I learned. So that sucked. And then, of course, going to subbing. And then there's always the money issue. You know, you're going from making this much a year to now to making this much a year. And that was something that sucked too, because it was like, man, I got to go on these nice vacations in the summer with what I made. And now it's like, if I want a vacation, we're going to Walmart. That's my vacation.
I want to go back. I meant to ask this earlier, but it's sort of more talking about in the classroom last school year. You taught, as you said, you taught government and history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And were any of those mandatory courses? Were they what's the word when you have to take them?
They were gen ed classes. The sophomores had to take world history, and your seniors had to take government for a semester, and then economics for another semester. Those were required.
Interesting. Do you think that affected their treatment? Because I feel like even just myself, like when I walk into a class that I chose to take, like it's an option, I feel in general like it's just a different vibe. Like you still get bored once in a while, but you want to be there more than, say, in math class, which you have to take, or, it's definitely different walking into English, which is, in Canada, and I would assume it's the same in the States, mandatory all through high school. It's definitely a different vibe to me. Did you sort of think about that as well? I'm teaching classes where the students definitely don't want to be here probably, but they have to take it. Or at least you could assume, you could come to the assumption that they don't want to take it because they have to be there.
You're always going to have some that, that aren't, but to me, it's my job to make them not like it sometimes, but tolerate it. I have to get creative. I want them to like the class. And if students like a class, they're going to learn more. I mean, that's just simple. They're going to pay attention more. They're going to learn more. So to me, that was on me then to make them want to enjoy my class, doing stuff that was out of the box, incorporating movies, doing anything I can to make them pay attention more and like the class. So I think that's the teacher's responsibility, really, is to make a kid interested in a class.
So right now you are subbing. How often are you subbing? I know you actually subbed in elementary class the other day. I'm going to ask you about the differences between high school and elementary in a second, but subbing, how often? I know, again, it's sort of, to my knowledge, just from seeing subs go in and out, it's sort of like if you get the call, you're going to be working that day. If you don't, just stay home. Like, it's definitely random, I would think. How does the schedule work, and how crappy is it?
It's a crappy schedule. It's a few days here and there, then nothing, a few days here and there. Luckily, it's given me time to study for my special ed test that I take next month, but it's definitely not something that you can rely on for a living, subbing.
Right. And as far as actually being a substitute teacher, how, is there any, do you like it at all, or is it just really just annoying?
I hate it. It's like trying to, I rather sit there and like watch the most boring MMA fight you can think of that just puts people to sleep. I'll watch that over and over and over again instead of having to sub. Like, you go in there, especially with me, to where I was teaching. So now I go in there and the classroom is not mine. I don't know what kind of discipline this teacher has on their students. I don't know what to expect. And look, I was a kid too. When a sub comes in, it basically, there's a light that goes off head. We're not have to do anything. So like the teacher can leave all this work behind, and half of them aren't going to do it. It's towards like this, it sucks, because I want to get up there and I want to teach. Like, teaching is what I want to do, but usually you're only left with handouts that you give the students, and then they don't do it, and then it's just basically sitting there watching the inmates run the asylum for the whole day.
Right. And from my point of view, from my experiences as a student, when a sub comes in, it's sort of not a stereotype really, but it's just sort of, you assume, oh, they must not be, or be great at their job. They don't have a full-time position. They must suck, or but not even just the fact that they don't have a full-time job and are having to sub, but it's also, the fact is they don't know what's going on. They don't know what you're taking, what the class is. They might not be an English major despite subbing in an English class once a month.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's just sort of like, hey, here's a sheet of paper, do what it says. I'm going to go sit down, and if you have any questions, ask me. I might not be able to answer them. Like substitute teachers, they can't almost come off as if they know what they're talking about because they don't know what's going on in that class.
Yeah, I could be subbing for some calculus class or something, and I don't know. I suck at math, so I try to, when there's openings, sub for positions that I'm familiar with, social studies, history, stuff like that, so that I can at least know what they're doing. But if you give me a math class or something like that, I got no clue. No clue.
And so you're going different schools, or are you sticking to this one?
It's different schools, elementary, middle school, high school. I'm kind of liking higher up elementary, like 4th, 5th, 6th, or 4th and 5th. I like middle school, so those are possibilities. I just can't do like kindergarten, first grade. Like that's too little. I don't like chasing kids around.
And I assume you have not been back to the school you worked at last year.
No, different school district. Don't want to go back.
And so just the other day you subbed in a really like low age class, like 2 or grade
kindergarten. 2. So these were like 5-year-olds.
Wow. So that must have been quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm not good with little kids. Like I don't like chasing them around, and then when they start talking, 90% of the time it's like you're not making any sense. Like I don't know what you're talking about. Like I just don't have the patience for like little kids. And I mean, it was kind of an experience because like it was kind of cool in a way because I'd have 5-year-olds come up to me, what's your name? And like tugging on my shirt and stuff. And I'm like, I'm Mr. Likes. And then they would look at my badge, which has my photo on it. And they'd be like, that looks just like you. And inside I'm thinking, because it is me, but they're 5 years old. They don't really know much. They're not very smart. But it was interesting because then you have kids that would just randomly cry and get upset. And it's just like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I can't do little kids. You there?
You went super robotic. Are you back?
Okay. Yeah. I was just talking about how like, yeah, I couldn't
Justyn?
do. Oh. Yeah. You hear me? Good?
His internet can. Oh, are you back?
You hear me?
Justyn, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you now. You were gone for about 20 seconds.
Yeah, I was just talking about like as far as little kids, I couldn't do that. That's just the crying and just can't do that.
Yeah. You initially wanted to, if I remember, I remember seeing somewhere you told me, just texting or you said somewhere in a Facebook post, your main priority, what you wanted to do or who you wanted to teach was high school students, right? At the beginning, at least.
Yeah, it is still as high school, but I'm more entertained to the option of doing middle school or elementary school as long as it's 4th, 5th graders, maybe 3rd. But not kindergarten ever again.
And that's something you've sort of realized because of this substitute teacher stint.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, I knew I was never great with little kids. I don't have the most patience, and especially if I want to teach history, it's kind of boring teaching kindergartners because you're teaching them about Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims and the Indians, and you're vanilla with what you can really teach. You really can't get into World War II and Hitler and stuff. You got to keep it really PG and stuff you don't really want to teach.
Hey, we learned about Christopher Columbus last year, so I guess we're sort of behind the ball.
Well, there's that, that jingle, wherever that I always remember from elementary school, and kids still learn, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and I always remember watching the South Park episode, and they were saying, in 1492, Columbus got us a day off school, which I like a lot more because Columbus is a holiday, at least here, to where kids have off.
Right. I guess though, when you're teaching kindergarteners about Columbus, I remember what you probably know because you teach history, but there's something like he isn't quite he wasn't quite the nicest person. Something
yeah, you can't sit there and tell kindergartens that this dude killed Indians and enslaved them, and if you got to teach them about he saw America, he discovered it, and he sailed the seas, and he was this nice
we wouldn't
person.
be here. So thank Christopher Columbus.
You have to teach a very watered down version of history to little kids. You can't tell them, oh, by the way, he freaking murdered Indians and stuff, because then they'll cry and all that
that's
stuff.
The thing with a lot of school. It's always so interesting to me when I'm in say grade 6 science, and they don't tell you the whole full story. They leave out a ton of stuff, especially with harder courses like science, where it's so, well, for lack of a better word, it's so scientific and it's so specific, and there's so many different, little details. And if you have everything in, it's just not a grade 6 class anymore. I always found it interesting going from gradually going from say grade 6 to 7, 8, 9, all the way to grade 12 science. It's oh, I remember learning about that, but they didn't tell us about that. I didn't know that was a thing that happened.
Yeah.
It's always interesting.
I had that too when you're teaching high school and you're on a subject and kids are like, we weren't taught that, or from middle school, we don't remember that. So it's kind of like when you're younger, you get introduced to something. The older you get, the more rooted into it. Not till really college do you kind of figure out the whole story when it comes to history or science.
Yeah. Well, I guess my last thing for you, Justyn, would be where do you go from here? Of course, next month you're doing your special ed test. Good luck, and hopefully you pass that, of course. So as I guess you'll be subbing pretty much for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you can't hop in say in January.
Well, that's the thing. There's always I could. That's why next month is such a big opportunity for me, because with special ed, like I said, there's so many positions that are available to where if I pass it, then I can start applying for more positions. And there's a lot of special ed positions, that are available. There's nothing social studies right now that I see, but there's a lot of special ed. So, the sooner I can pass this, the sooner I can start applying and maybe get something the second half of the year, in February.
How does that work though? Jumping in half with half the year is over, just because I guess with special ed, since there's such a need, there's not really anyone in that job or not enough. So they're just going to take, even if from September to December, they only had 2 people working in that field, having a third person for the second half is fine. Is that sort of how that works?
Yeah. There's positions that always come up. There's always something that happens, whether a teacher, they move, this is San Antonio isn't a huge military community, but there is, because there's a lot of military. There still are a few military bases around here. So someone's husband or wife gets stationed somewhere else, they move, they need another position, boom. They have more kids that are getting enrolled, they need another position. There's always stuff that opens, through the course of the year, whether someone's moving or they just need more help.
Awesome. Well, that is all I have. I just looked at the YouTube chat, and Liam Hughes, a longtime listener of all of my shows, he wants to ask, or firstly, he says it's my internet that is having problems, not yours. So I guess
I pay a crap load for this internet, so it better not be messing up.
Yeah, it could be mine. He says he wants me to ask you, who is your favorite author?
My favorite author right now, I'm not a huge as far as history reading, but I'm reading a book by Mary Beard that is basically an entire history book on the history of Rome. So if we're looking at history related, it's Mary Beard. Outside of that, Stephen King is probably my favorite author.
Interesting. Well, unless Liam drops another question in within the next 2 or 3 minutes, that is all. Justyn, really great having you here on episode 3 of Beyond Combat. It was great chatting to you about something not related to MMA, because of course our first podcast was on the MMA circus. For any longtime listeners of the show would have remembered, perhaps. This was a pretty fun discussion. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media, and plug away your writing and anything else.
All right. Social media is simple. I'm on Twitter at Justyn Likes, JSTY. I'm spelled with a Y there. And then, I got some stuff coming out in the next week for boxing and MMA, a few interviews, because that's my forte is doing interviews. And hopefully it looks like December, Combate is coming here to San Antonio, the promotion. So should be able to cover them. I know UFC is coming in February to Austin. That's close by, so some more opportunities there. But just Combat Press is where I write for, combatpress.com. You can catch my work on there.
Awesome. You guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all of my writing over at bloodyelbow.com. That is, of course, bloodyelbow.com. You can find my other podcast right here on this YouTube channel, The MMA Circus, on this YouTube channel, but also on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, SoundCloud, and many other podcast outlets, directories, whatever you want to call them. So go check that out. My other show, Before the Battle, is exclusively on this YouTube channel, just like Beyond Combat is. We will be recording the UFC Sydney edition of that show later tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. I'll be joined, as always, by Jed Mashu and Wesley Riddle of MMA Fighting and MMA Soccer, respectively. So make sure to tune in for that. This past week on the MMA Circus, we recorded it 2 days ago on this past Tuesday. Myself and my co-host, Andrew Lawrence, we talked all about last weekend's UFC Fight Night 121, and for some reason, what UFC was it last week? And for some reason, I can't remember.
Norfolk.
Yes, Norfolk. It was Pettis and Poirier. That's right. So we recapped that. We talked all about Jose Aldo stepping up against Max Holloway in the rematch. We talked about Anderson Silva's USADA suspension and Michael Bisping fighting Gastelum. And we talked about the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix tournament. That is fantastic. And we did give our predictions for Verdun Tybura, but that's a pretty bad card. So we didn't touch on that too much. If you do want to hear us talk about that in depth, that is, of course, what we'll be doing on Before the Battle later tonight. Interviews all on this YouTube channel. I've taken up enough time already, so I'm not going to plug those, but just go to the interviews playlist and you can find all of them. Wonderboy Thompson, Walt Harris are the most recent ones. Thank you all for watching. We really do appreciate it. If you have any criticism, any suggestions, anything you like, you don't like, for Beyond Combat, for this episode, for our other episodes, hit me up on Twitter. Feel free to hit Justyn up on Twitter as well. Thank you all for listening and watching. We will be back in 2 weeks. For Justyn Likes, my name is Nick Baldwin, and we are out.